Our moderator for this evening is Bob Hiss. Bob Hiss is a former chairman of the Milton Republican Town Committee, a former treasurer for the Norfolk County Republican Committee, and for the past 8 years has served with distinction as the town moderator in Milton. Bob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. Richard's learning because usually when he has a microphone, he talks like this gesture. So he's now learned to keep the mic this way when you got a handheld mic. So let me just describe, again, my name is Bob Hiss. Thank you all for coming tonight. The format tonight is we're going to start with opening statements from each of the candidates, and I'll have 3 minutes for an opening statement. And since we have a nice ACD alphabetic rundown, I think we'll just run down the table alphabetically. And then we have questions that have come in either from members of our Zoom audience who are online, or as Richard said, questions that are coming in from you on the tables. And so we've got people who are going to assimilate the questions, try to eliminate the duplicates. We'll ask questions. We'll ask folks to have limit the candidates to limit it to 2 minutes. And then when we get to 8:20, then at 8:20, we'll wrap up the questions and we'll go to the straw poll. And we'll have one of our members, Ann Ragosta, tabulate the results. They'll be assisted by the interns we have and then observed by representatives of all the 3 campaigns. So 3-minute opening, Q&A with 2-minute answers, and then we'll have the straw poll. So with that, why don't we start with Mr. Antonellis? You have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi, thank you. I want to tell you why I'm running for U.S. Senate, and that is because I am the one candidate on the stage who supports Donald Trump and the America First agenda. So I'm fighting for you, I'm fighting for America, I'm fighting for America First and Massachusetts First. We've got some big problems in Washington, D.C., as you know. Washington, D.C. is broken, and it's been lawyers, lobbyists, gosh knows who, politicians, and Elizabeth Warren have been breaking it. So what I bring to the table is the fact that I'm an engineer, UMass Amherst Industrial Engineering, and I've learned from the start how to fix things. And so I intend to bring an America First agenda to the floor of the Senate and restore this country to, well, its former greatness. We've had some big issues. The border is broken. We know that. We need to have a return to secure border after, with the help of Donald Trump as president. I'm going to be backing him fully on that. We've got drugs. We've got killers. We've got all kinds of terrible things rushing across the border. And we have a problem with our state in particular, because we are a sanctuary state, and we're basically like a magnet for anything broke, anything wrong and frightening that's coming across that border. Just somehow comes like a magnet to our state, and then we are obliged somehow, don't ask me how, to pay our future billions upon billions of dollars. And we need to end that entire state and status for Massachusetts. This race is a very interesting race, like I've never seen before. I'm running against a couple of newcomers to the Republican Party. I'm a conservative Republican, and I first voted Republican in November 1980, and that was a freshman year for me, UMass Amherst, and guess who I voted for? Ronald Reagan.
Sir, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. And I've been a Republican ever since, and I do question whether we're going to be able to defeat Warren if we have a broken party and we're not respecting the fact that Donald J. Trump is the head of the party. So that's what I'm asking for you to support me, and let's win this election.
Thank you very much, Mr. King.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much for moderating tonight. Thank you for the Norfolk County Republican Committee for hosting this evening. Thank you to all of you for being here, for taking the time to spend with us this evening. And thank you all on Zoom for joining online. My name is Ian Kane. I am a Massachusetts native. I'm the only Massachusetts native in this entire race. I was born in Quincy, went to the public schools there, went to Boston College High School, graduated from Boston College in 2004 with a degree in political science, and eventually pursued an MBA at Duke University. Over that time, I've been a small business owner, I've been a local entrepreneur, and I've been an innovation leader, always seeking collaboration in anything that I pursue. I answered a call to service in 2015 and first ran for the Quincy City Council. So since that time, I've been 5 times elected to that role, been in it for 9 years, and I'm currently the Quincy City Council president, which is a position that's elected by my peers. As you very well know, Elizabeth Warren sits in our seat in Massachusetts, and she uses it to propel her own celebrity. This is a person that is wildly out of touch with Massachusetts, with voters, with any issue that we care about. She's focused on nationwide issues, and she spends a lot of time traveling around the country raising money, but not focusing on the things that matter to us here. But on top of that, she's the most partisan, divisive member of the United States Congress. She is the reason that Washington doesn't work for us. I'm running to usher in the next generation of leadership. I'm young, I'm energetic, I just turned 42. And we've got a lot of people that don't represent the future of this country from the top of the ticket on down. It's time to make some changes. Young people like me focus on things like the digital economy and focusing on how we can create pathways to prosperity for young people instead of mortgaging their lives away at 17 and 18 years old. The number one issue in Massachusetts right now is the immigration issue, the illegal immigration. We've become a border state here, and it's become untenable. We need to create partnerships with both the state and local levels, with the federal government, to make sure that we do not continue this problem that has been both a physical and a financial burden on our state and on your pockets.
About 30 seconds.
Thank you. At the end of the day, I promise to be a voice for you. I'm running as a Republican because this uni-party control in the state is way off balance. We're all out to lunch. And it's time to create some common sense and to bring that back to the table so that we can make things right for us at the end of the day and focus on the things that matter, which again are illegal immigration and the general economy, your pocketbook. So I look forward to continuing this conversation tonight. I look forward to having the chance to earn your vote on September 3rd, and then again on November 5th when we take out Elizabeth Warren. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the Norfolk County GOP, and also thank you to everyone that's present and online. And I want to say thank you to the veterans who made this space available to us. Listen, some of you know my story. Some of you read my book, Food Stamp Warrior. I come from a unique perspective, single mother on welfare and food stamps, living in one of the worst neighborhoods in America. Born into generational poverty, surrounded by drugs and violence that included the worst kind of violence on me that a child could ever encounter. Watched my mother be stabbed. My first day of high school, I had a 38 shoved in my mouth and the hammer cocked. And the next day I became a high school dropout, just like every single person in my family. And my mother, God bless her, the hero of my life, she put her arms around me when she caught me crying, because I told her I wanted to go to college. No one in my family had ever graduated high school. And she said, "Why are you so upset?" I said, "Mom, I really want to go to college. And I love my mother. She's my hero." She put her arm around me and said, "I'm sorry, son, but that's not for people like us." That's what generational poverty does to people. Strips them of their ambitions, their self-esteem. And at 14 years old, on that day, something clicked. I decided I was going to break generational poverty. And if I became a father, I was going to break the cycle of a deadbeat dad, and I'd be a good father. And at 14 years old, I found a private high school, and I worked, and I paid off high school, and then I paid off college. And then I took 2 years off and drove a forklift, waited tables. and I made my way to Boston. And I realized at New England School of Law, living in Roxbury, that I was going to be the American dream. And pride overcame me. And I joined the United States Marine Corps. It's something I'm very proud of. I could not get into Harvard. I could not afford Harvard Law, but I beat out Harvard Law, BC, BU, Suffolk, Northeastern, and Western New England School of Law. And I was chosen to represent the entire Commonwealth for the 1994 Judge Advocate Law Contract, something I'm very proud about. And I served 7.5 years of active duty, Special Assistant United States Attorney. I was actually fighting drug infiltration of the southern border at the Yuma Crossing in the 1990s as the chief prosecutor for the base and Special Assistant United States Attorney. I got injured, not in combat, but in training. I got medically retired. I got out of the Marine Corps, and for the last 22 years, I've been representing the working class across the Commonwealth.
You have about 30 seconds, sir.
We're talking about plumbers, pipe fitters, sheet metal workers, shipyard workers, and some of the biggest places, Quincy Four River Shipyard, Brayton Point, Canal Electric. For 22 years, I've been representing the working families across this Commonwealth, and I'm going to do it in the United States Senate. Thank you.
Gentlemen, you have internal clocks that are outstanding, all 3 minutes, every one of you, so well done. So we have some questions that have come in already, some in advance and some coming in online. I'll start with a very topical one. What I'll do is I'll start with Mr. Deaton, then see if the other members want to answer that question or go to a different one. So Mr. Deaton, what's your opinion on President Biden's proposal to reform the Supreme Court? And Senator Elizabeth Warren sees the packing the court agenda as energizing the Democratic base. 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. But let me make it clear, I'm completely opposed to it. And we've got to take the partisanship out of it. I mean, what they want to do is obviously pack the Supreme Court with more justices that fit their particular ideology. And that is a recipe for disaster, because what happens next? When someone else, another group, let's say the Republicans take control, like I think they will, are they then going to now add more justices to fit their ideology? Listen, in this country, we are facing a crisis of trust in our institutions. We all know that. And the most sacred institution of all in a country that is governed by laws is the United States Supreme Court. That is the law of the land. When the public loses trust in that institution, then we are in a sad state of affairs, and that's what's going to happen. And it doesn't go to the root of the problem. Okay, there are other alternatives. It's funny how these career politicians, they're offering term limits as an alternative to the Supreme Court justice, but they don't want it for themselves. And that's why we have to have term limits. The first bill I'm going to write in the U.S. Senate will be for term limits, so that career politicians like Elizabeth Warren, who sit back, they fuel the division amongst us so that they can stay in power, and then they want to stack the court to fit their particular ideology. And when the public loses trust in institutions like that, then we got a problem. Maybe as an alternative, we could implement term limits, but I would only support term limits for Supreme Court justices if there are term limits for the United States Congress.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Green, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure, I'll just take it. I don't believe in the expansion of the Supreme Court. I think, in particular, a person like Elizabeth Warren, she does a number of things in order to maintain her position in the United States government, because she's an ineffective legislator. The first is that she overreaches her influence in the executive branch of government. This is a woman that ran for president of the United States as soon as she had come into the seat of the U.S. Senate in Massachusetts, bought influence into the executive office so that she could have oversized influence in the regulatory regime as well as the bureaucracy, because she can't get things done in the U.S. Congress. So on the other side of that, she's trying to pack the court so that she can continue to have more influence with her party at the same time. But at the end of the day, what this does is diminish the voice of the people in the legislative body. I certainly respect the three branches of government and the power that each has received through the Constitution. And so the point for us is that Elizabeth Warren needs to go. This is a person that has diminished our power, and she continues to give more power to the other branches of government, which diminishes our overall capacity to have a voice in government. So that's my point on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis.
Yeah, I'll continue with that same question. I have a different perspective on the 9-0, well, the 9 positions of the Supreme Court. I was in the Supreme Court. I was at the Supreme Court on the day of a very important decision that I don't think people really know much about. Hal Shurtleff versus the city of Boston. He was suing the city of Boston in order to fly the Christian flag. And it went 9-0 in favor of Hal Shurtleff. And so the reason why that's so important is that judgment was stepped on by the radical left, including the White House. And the way they stepped on it, it was January the 18th, 2022, when this oral arguments took place. I was outside. I didn't know what it would be. May the 2nd, it came out that Hal Shurtleff won 9-0. It was an unprecedented case of, it was the most important case of free speech and religious liberties in the history of the United States. And what it showed is that 9 justices is plenty when you have a subject that's genuinely a constitutional matter. But it was stepped on out of pure fear by the radical left. And they stepped on it how? By leaking the Dobbs decision on May the 2nd. So May the 2nd was the day that Hal Shurtleff, we were all working from home that day, and suddenly we were thinking, oh, Hal won 9-0. We thought it was going to be 5-4, 6-3, maybe 7-2. It came back 9-0. It was unprecedented. We were ready to have a party. And then later that day, he was already waiting with Newsmax to go online for an interview because that's how important it is. And then in the meanwhile, the Dobbs leak happened. So they stepped on the news that Hal Shurtleff won, and that would totally break the whole radical left paradigm. For example,
If you could wrap up, sir. Pretty soon.
That's it?
A couple minutes.
Okay.
A couple seconds.
Okay, so it broke the paradigm where they say, oh, we can put Black Lives Matter on Fifth Avenue. You can't do that. That's unconstitutional according to Hal Shurtleff's win against. Oh, yeah. I'll cover the term limits conversation in the next question. Thanks.
Thank you. We had an interesting question come in online. Let me just catch this one. What are your thoughts on simplifying the federal income taxes? Would you prefer taking adjusted gross income, subtracting, having standard deductions, flat tax? What are your thoughts on that? Perhaps I'll start with Mr. King.
I'm all for what's going to allow us to pay less than we currently are. Let's put it that way. I think that the current tax regime that we have set up is grossly unfair. I think that the way that it is currently presented, including promoted by people like Elizabeth Warren, is that people should pay their fair share. People are paying their fair share. So it's time that we, sort of reconstitute how that formula is calculated. I think, every idea that I hear promoted from Elizabeth Warren is that billionaires should be paying more. But at the end of the day, when we're allocating over 80,000 more employees to places like the IRS so that we can look into the taxes of people that make under $200,000 a year, that's criminal because that's coming out of our pockets at the end of the day.
Thank you. Mr. Deaton, do you want to take that?
Sure. Listen, when you have to support 87,000 new IRS agents, do you think we might need to modify the code? And of course, we need to modify the code. Listen, Elizabeth Warren is great at one thing, fighting against things and against issues. And that is very different than fighting for things. For example, she fights against the wealthy and the rich. That is not the same as fighting for the poor and the middle class. You do not have to tear people down to lift people up. And when we talk about taxes, her solution to everything is one solution: just tax the wealthy, tax the rich. We got climate change issues, tax the wealthy. We got public education problems, tax the wealthy. We got immigration concerns, tax the wealthy. So I'm looking forward to staying on stage with her and saying, you know what, Senator Warren, there's 759 billionaires living in America. Their cumulative wealth is $5 trillion. Let's not tax it, let's take it all. Let's take it all from them. And all we would do is be able to pay the interest on our national debt for 4.5 years. It's not a solution. I'm looking forward to showing the American people that you can lift people up like me, who is poor, and expand the middle class without pitting American versus American and tearing other people down. And I think they're going to choose an uplifting approach instead of a destructive one.
We've got a couple questions come in on Bitcoin, actually from two different sides. One said at the Bitcoin convention last week, Donald Trump spoke to great acclaim against Elizabeth Warren anti-crypto agenda. Kamala Harris declined to address Bitcoin. What is your opinion on the Bitcoin issue? And there's a twist on that. Someone else said Bitcoin is either the greatest attraction or the greatest disruption that is coming. So perhaps Mr. Antonellis, you first.
Yes, Bitcoin, I've written an article in the Boston Broadside. I think that was the July issue. I am dead set. I'm an engineer, first of all. I'm dead set against Bitcoin. And you can be against it for one reason only. And you don't need, there's plenty of reasons to be against it. Energy consumption of Bitcoin is unbelievable. People think, how can that be a factor? I'll tell you how. One Bitcoin transaction uses as much electricity, this is astounding, as 500,000 Visa transactions. It's a fundamental fraud, an engineering fraud. It's something similar to the Green New Deal fraud. And it's causing family farms to fail. It's causing your electricity bill to skyrocket. It's killing American manufacturing. And I'm telling you, there's a deep state connection to the creation of this. It wasn't one man, it wasn't one brilliant guy that figured it out. No, it's a big operation. It's so incredibly complex, and I'm dead set against Bitcoin. Do I have time to do the other one, the other issue that I talked about? Yeah. So as far as term limits, for the concept of cleaning up Washington, absolutely. So it's my heart is on the same side of people that are for term limits, but I think the idea is kind of a little bit of it's a populist issue. The reality is that there's a learning process. When you go to the Senate, when you go to the House of Representatives, there's a learning process. You can't say that, okay, somebody is going to be truncated after what, 2 or 3 terms, let's say 6 years for the House, 1 or 2 terms, which would be 12 years in the Senate. Because then you miss out people like Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan was great. How long has he been in there? Would he been kicked out already? How about Newt Gingrich and the contract for America? These were big events that were very important for conservatism, and it takes learning, and it's a gradual process. So I'm actually I'm for the concept of cleaning up the criminality, and I'd like to have a chance to talk about that in a minute, but I think term limits might be overkill.
Thank you.
Can I comment on the big ones?
Yes, Mr. King.
Yeah, President Trump was invited to speak at the Bitcoin conference, and someone else was, that was me. Me and Bernie Moreno and other high-profile Republican candidates in key states were asked to go speak at the Bitcoin conference. And President Trump, who sort of he caught up to me because when he was president, he wasn't for it. Now he's actually taking the position that all Bitcoin mining should take place in the United States. But let me tell you something. I sued the government over this pro bono, and 65,000 plus token holders, not companies, joined me. 627 here in the Commonwealth, and we sued the United States government for their gross overreach, and we won. And I became a little known in this area. But people ask, am I a Bitcoin candidate or a pro-crypto candidate? And I say, absolutely not. I'm a pro-freedom candidate. And I don't believe the government should tell you what assets you're allowed to own and not own. But the crypto candidate is Elizabeth Warren. With illegal immigration, debt crisis, opioid crisis, inflation crisis, housing crisis, foreign wars, and the world slipping in chaos, on her re-election announcement, she wakes up one day and says, with all those real world problems, I'm going to focus on Bitcoin, and I'm going to ban Bitcoin in the United States. So she's actually the crypto candidate. And again, I'm looking forward to standing on stage and confronting her on this issue.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, the reality is that Elizabeth Warren launches her campaign for Senate this year and claims that she's she's building an anti-crypto army. There's no such thing as an anti-crypto army. The anti-crypto army would consist of large institutional banks that sit mostly in the way of your everyday life and your transaction life. Bitcoin and blockchain in general is probably another class that we should hold because I'm sure that I don't know how many people have exposure to Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Just raise your hand real quick. Okay, all right, that's good to know. But generally, Bitcoin is something of a concept that you should probably be in favor for, especially as a Republican from a philosophical standpoint. You know, this was something that might have come from somewhere, might have come from anywhere else. We don't know. It was created under a pseudonymous name of a person that was, potentially Japanese. But the idea is that it disintermediates transactions between us, and it allows us as individuals to transact without the need for a third party, thereby eliminating fees and people monitoring their transactions and having any control over that. So the freedom term is true. But at the end of the day, Elizabeth Warren doesn't have an anti-crypto army to run on. Bitcoin is a very interesting concept that most of it actually runs on wasted energy and not energy like Bob just described. And so there is unique applications for wasted energy that we're generating all across the country and across the world that the United States should be in control of. So this is a very strategic initiative that does have national security implications for the U.S.
Thanks. We had a couple come in on, would you as a U.S. Senator pledge your support to sponsor a bill requiring a balanced budget or at a minimum halt deficit spending without raising income taxes? I think we'll start with Mr. G.
Yeah, I actually signed a pledge of no higher taxes. Listen, 80%, and you're gonna think I'm exaggerating, but you can fact check. 80% of all US dollars in circulation today were printed in the last 3.5 years. 80%. In January of 2020, we had $4 trillion US dollars in circulation. Today, it's 20 trillion. You cannot debase your currency to that extent and not expect inflation. And when inflation increases, prices increase. And it doesn't matter when President Biden or Elizabeth Warren are talking about, oh, inflation is coming down. You know what doesn't come down with the inflation? Those prices that were already placed higher. And that crushes working people and it destroys the poor. It's a tax on working families. And so, of course, we've got to get the spending under control in the United States Congress. Their answer to every question is to just hit the printer button and just print more money. And we're going to have more inflation, and we're at the risk of hyperinflation. It does happen. It's happened in smaller countries, obviously, like Venezuela, Zimbabwe, in all of those countries. But the United States is headed that way. So we've got to elect people who are actually fiscal responsible, conservative, fiscal responsible people that actually care that they're not spending taxpayers' money. And so when I get to the Senate, I'm going to support only bills that do not add to our debt, because we have 35 trillion in debt right now with the government, 1.2 trillion credit card debt. Credit card debt is an all-time high in delinquency. That just happened this month. We're going off a cliff unless we elect people who are going to be responsible.
Thank you. I think it's easy to speak in hyperbolic statements and say that, I'm going to eradicate this and that. There hasn't been a budget passed in a very long time in Congress. They've been continuing resolutions have been passed to continue funding for the government. I've had this conversation with a lot of Republican town committees and others along the way. Everyone wants to believe in the concept of fiscal conservancy. That doesn't exist anymore. And it doesn't exist for a number of reasons. We've been artificially inflating our economy since, as long as I can remember. Let's go back to TARP days and the bailout of the large banks, go through housing crises, right? And now we're in the COVID times where we just passed 2 hugely inflationary bills, omnibus packages that added to our national debt considerably and our inflation. I took that same pledge. I don't plan to vote on any bills that would increase your taxes, but I certainly know what I don't know, which is we'd be coming into a position as a junior level senator in a, very deeply held relationship in Washington, D.C. So you got to understand who you can work with to courageously make decisions that would pass budgets and cut government funding to, at the end of the day, make our lives better.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips.
Yeah, when it comes to dramatically reducing the scale of the government, I would like to see either a complete elimination of these omnibus spending bills, or maybe a dramatic reduction, because it might be in some cases they're useful. But so omnibus bills, multi-trillion-dollar omnibus bills are a disaster. We've got issue, but then some people suggest, hey, how about a line item veto to solve that problem? And actually, I think that would be giving too much power to the executive branch. I'd like to finish up on the Bitcoin discussion. What Ian talked about, that it was wasted energy anyway. Well, the fact of the matter is that I put those two, Bitcoin and Green New Deal, together because it's shocking what they're planning to do with the amount of heat dissipation. So wherever you get the energy from, doesn't matter. The fact is, there's heat that needs to be dissipated. They're actually going to use the cooling stations under the ocean, the ones that they're thinking about building for these wind turbines. And if they discover, oh, we got canceled, because that's what Donald Trump has been saying, I've been saying it for months now, a complete federal ban on wind turbines in the ocean. Yeah, we need that in Nantucket for sure. So, but the plan is to cool the hot cables in cooling stations underwater. And what they're saying is, if we can't use them for that, because we don't need the wind towers, we're gonna use it for Bitcoin. We're gonna use it for artificial intelligence. And all it's gonna do is turn the ocean into a bath, and everything in it is gonna be dead. So that's gonna be my issue. Ban the Bitcoin, ban the windmills. Otherwise, we're gonna turn the ocean, we're gonna turn the Bay State into the Dead Sea.
Thank you. I have an interesting question that's come in from linked our Zoom group. Please share your position on the Title IX changes and how you will work to protect women's rights against the transgender lobby in school and sports. I think we'll start with Mr. Angelis.
I am strongly against transgender men competing in women's sports, boys using the girls' room. I'm quite set against it. I've been calling for womanhood first, actually. That's been a very popular topic. A lot of people have appreciated that because it involves multiple attacks on womanhood. And those attacks include Islam, Sharia law. It treats a woman and her feelings and her thoughts and her hopes and her aspirations as if it has value 0. And now, quite interestingly, you go to these transgender men who claim to be women. They believe that if they just put the right clothes on, put an earring on, change their name, that they're a woman. And so they give the same value to that woman's hopes, feelings, dreams, aspirations as radical Islam. So actually, I've been talking about, people like, and you know who I'm talking about, the Bud Light guy, being nothing really more than Islam, what's the word? Jihadis in a tutu, really. So in other words, it's the same group. This is a multi-thousand-year war on humanity, on Western civilization. And womanhood, I'll just finish up. Womanhood is kind of like the glue, the connecting tissue of Western civilization. There's so many people that we just instinctively do kind things for one another when we meet. And I really do believe that if you trace it back thousands of years into the history, the evolution of humanity, you're going to find that the mother's love of a child is the original love. And then from that came the love of the family, the community, the neighbors, the co-workers. And when they want to destroy Western civilization, I believe they genuinely targeted womanhood This has been going on for a long, long time.
If you could wrap up, sir. Thank you.
I think I'm generally perplexed by the amount of work that has gone into promote and advance women's rights over the span of my lifetime and beyond. And, you know, we've come to a place where there's a very controversial subject as well as policy that's being promoted in places that don't really advance, I think, that cause, and certainly don't advance our concepts of community and citizens. I certainly support maintaining female sports as female sports. You know, I know that this is a very highly sensitive discussion kind of in the ethos right now, but again, I go back to the original statement, which is I don't understand why we're trying to advance new policy that eradicates work that we have made and worked so hard to advance for women in our society.
Mr. Reed.
A lot of people fought hard for Title IX, women in athletics, college, high school. They really weren't given the due that they deserved. And then Title IX happened. Listen, I have a unique perspective because I'm a father of 3 daughters and I served the United States Marine Corps and I trained with women and intense training. And there are biological differences. And, you know, they were outstanding women Marines. But there were differences between the men and the women. So when you talk about sports, you just got to have common sense. Fundamentally, it must be safe and it must be a level playing field and it must be fair. And so I certainly oppose biological men by boxing biological women or UFC fighters, mixed martial arts. And that's really all the topic I would say. As someone who's coached my daughter's teams, we want safe, level playing field and fair.
Thank you, sir. Next, I think, Mr. Angelos, we got you on that. Next, we have a question on from a veteran, I think. Why are homeless veterans living on the streets while migrants are living in hotels around the state? All the rights to that.
Well, I'm a
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, Mr. Deaton. Well, I'm mixing it up. Mr. Deaton gets first.
Well, I'm a veteran. I'm a veteran, as you know, and I'm going to try to contain a bit of anger when we talk about this topic because it's shocking to me, absolutely shocking, that the state legislature is trying to implement priority for veterans over illegal immigrants who are just coming. People who wore a uniform, who prepared to give their life, who come back without limbs. And we have to even have it shouldn't even be a conversation. And that initiative fails in the state legislature. It's disgusting and it's a disgrace. And the fact is, well, the way we treat our veterans in this country is pathetic. I have veterans coming up to me saying, John, I have $300 in co-pays for my prescriptions at the VA. And I have to watch people who just crossed illegally get money, housing, free. It's an insult to them. And it's an insult to their service. And it's an insult to the families who've lost servicemen and women in combat. And so it's something that one of the committees I'm going to demand, and when I say I'm going to demand it, I'm going to demand a junior senator or not, is going to be for veteran services. And I'm going to do whatever I can to do something about it.
Mr. Antonellis, would you?
I think it's an outrage. I think it's horrible. I think it's a crime. And it's bigger than a crime because the whole system is so dramatically corrupt. And there's a lot of backdoor happenings that people don't even understand. I've done a lot of work, a lot of research into, this area, Boston, Harvard, Cambridge, and the connection to America's oldest enemy of all, and it's the British Crown. we have a problem with Washington DC. We have a problem with the State House. We have a problem with people making deals that are, this is outrageous. And what I am, one of the terms that I've come up with is pension purgatory, which is an interesting idea for, came up initially when teachers are transgendering the children and they're putting the schools of a community at high risk of lawsuits, that those teachers maybe shouldn't be the ones that we're looking to give a monthly kiss in the mail, if you know what I mean. And I think what we need to start doing is for these government officials that are signing off on this huge amount of money, like who said that it should be Governor Healy gets to decide, oh yeah, we're a sanctuary state, you know, we're just gonna do that, like, who made her queen? And it's just not right. There's something going on, and there's high criminality at a lot of levels, and we need to investigate. I'm going to just throw out something quickly to you, because I know people call me a conspiracy theorist. No, I think that's fine. Because, you know, one of the most famous conspiracy theorists of all was, guess who? Sherlock Holmes. You know, so investigate. But I found some very interesting thing when I was exploring the potential replacement plan for the MLK statue in Boston, which I consider to be a disgrace. I call it the embrace disgrace. Because there's plenty of Black Americans that think like, this thing is pornographic, just get rid of it.
If you could wrap up pretty soon.
Yeah, so what I discovered was that MLK, that James Earl Ray was not in Memphis at the time of the shooting. And I'm sure everybody here thinks, oh yeah, he went to jail, he must have pled guilty. No, he didn't. He never pled guilty. And he was not in Memphis at the time of the shooting. And that's how good the radical left is at keeping a lie. We gotta end that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King.
Thank you. Not prepared to comment on that portion of the program, but I first want to thank John for his service to the country. And I also want to thank all the other service members who served our country, including my brother, who's in the office, who's an airman. And so I look at this situation. I look at this situation very personally. I didn't serve myself, but I have had many family members that have served. And it's absolutely despicable that anybody that has served on behalf of our country, that has advanced our interests in foreign nations that are not our own soil, but have benefited our lives to protect our livelihood, make sure that we're safe at the end of the day, is despicable. And so I know that this is largely a state issue that governs the right to shelter and the fact any sanctuary designation. But the first thing that I would do when I go to the US Senate is make sure that we pass a piece of legislation that makes sure states cannot designate themselves as sanctuary status. And that is the most important thing that we can do to make sure that the most vulnerable among us, the residents of our Commonwealth and of our country and citizens of the United States, are not left out in the lurch. And it's not lost to me that we're sitting in Veterans and Foreign Wars post right now, where we're sitting in the honor of people who've served our branches of the military.
Thank you. An interesting one came in online. What messages do you have to sway the votes of students, young people, to vote for you and not for Elizabeth Warren? We'll start with Mr. Antonellis and go to the left.
Well, I think young people need to be aware of the fraud that she's a part of. And with that fraud, I'm not talking about the fake Indian thing. I'm talking about just in general, the fraud that she's a part of when it comes to pushing this radical left agenda down the throats of Americans and basically putting the future of this country in a position where it's going to go bankrupt and where the young people are going to suffer greatly under the disaster that's been created by the radical left. And, you know, one example of that would be the windmills offshore, the lie. It's a fraud that we were sold. And for one thing, they can build as many wind turbines as they want offshore, and the government still states that it will have zero impact on global warming. So, you know, that's another one of those dirty little secrets that they don't ever talk about. But so talk about a time bomb, one blade from one windmill which is the blade itself was over 100 yards long, and I've heard it weighs over 20 tons. Talk about toxic, the oils, the chemicals, the shards of fiberglass, the foam, the everything. It turned the whole summer for Nantucket into a complete and total loss. And what is the future of those windmills that are already there have? Well, they're going to all fail. I mean, at some point, there's going to be no success because these things are very complicated. At some point, they will stop functioning. And who is going to go and come up with the money to remove them? Nobody. So one by one, those are going to drop into the ocean. We're going to have repeat, and just accelerate. It will accelerate until they're all gone. And the beaches will be destroyed. So they have to look at these frauds and understand they are being deceived. They have to protect their own futures.
Thank you. Mr. King, young people.
Thank you. I think generally where we're seeing young people falter these days is in succumbing to herd mentality. And not that adults don't, but young people especially in the colleges and university environment where they're promoting particular ideologies that gobble them up, like we've seen with the recent alignment with Hamas on college campuses across the country, which has been despicable. We're grossly misguiding our young people. And this is partially a person guided by Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren has been inciting this type of violence on college campuses across the country for different ideological purposes that do not serve the best interest of individuals or of our nation. Young people need to be guided to think for themselves, to understand that there are more perspectives than those that are being perpetrated by false idols and political celebrities like Elizabeth Warren. These people are put up on pedestals, and she supports that system. She comes from that university system, which is being propped up by our nation again. The money flows that go through there are unbelievable, from places like the Department of Education that flow through our pension systems into various investments in this country. And I think that, again, at the end of the day, it's making sure that we can break the spell that people are under, because that's what the Democrats are doing to our young people. And they're not letting them have their own sense of identity and a future that doesn't have to be guided by people like Elizabeth.
Thank you. Mr. Deep.
A couple of most important people on my campaign team are young people. They're my daughters. Olivia is 24, Jordan is 22, and I talk to them regularly because it's hard for me. I'm 57 years old. Obviously, I come up from a very difficult upbringing, and I want to understand the way these young people think. And I talk to them often about what they think. In fact, I'm in this race in large part because of them. And I think young people need to be inspired. That's what it really comes down to. Everything's negative, and they need good inspiration. I talked to my daughters and I said, I'm thinking of getting in the race, girls. I'm thinking of running for U.S. Senate, and I'm not going to start off small, girls. I'm going up a high mountain. I'm going to take on the most entrenched Washington elite in D.C., the darling of the progressives. And what do you think? And my daughter said, Dad, you're great at everything you do, but we think you're going to lose. Leave it to your kids to keep it real, right? And so I said, why do you think I'm going to lose? They said, Dad, because you're just too honest. And you will never say something that you don't believe, and you will never sell out. And I looked at my daughters and I said, you just convinced me to run for U.S. Senate. And I said, that can't be the standard in this country. I didn't serve in the United States Marine Corps for that to be the standard for young people. And so we change them by being an example. And I think that I can provide them with the inspiration they need.
Starting with Mr. King, we've had a couple of questions come in on what's your position on the Green New Deal versus pursuing energy independence?
So as a person that worked in the energy business for a number of years, I worked for an energy-focused investment fund, and we acquired and developed power plants in the Middle East, North Africa, and East Asia. So one thing I fundamentally understand is the need for baseload power and energy. The reason that we are so strong is because we're resource rich, and energy is the most important part of our economy. I certainly believe that we should be continuing to explore domestic production of oil and gas. I certainly think that we should be exploring the use of nuclear power to serve our baseload generation needs. I think that while green sounds nice, there's a much more complicated and political plan in play that doesn't actually support growth within a particular class of our economy, but supports the re-engineering of our economy to buy new things made by different people, most likely not here in America. And I think that enriching and enlivening our energy production here in the United States would provide some economic growth and development here that's necessary to help us thrive again.
Thank you. Mr. Dean?
Yeah, you know, when they started talking about the Green New Deal, they actually started with arbitrary dates. Oh, we'll be carbon neutral by, at the original date, believe it or not, was like 2032. Then they moved it to 2052. I want to ask them, how many times have you negotiated that with China? Because climate change is real, but it is a global phenomenon, and you cannot institute, goals that are unrealistic and put that burden on American innovation and on the American consumer, because that's who's going to pay for it. And so, of course, we need a multifaceted energy transition plan that includes natural gas, nuclear, all of the wind, solar, all those components. But we got to focus on innovation. The problem is the government gets in the way and it's overregulated. The overregulation is hurting America, and we're placing standards on American businesses that foreign competitors don't have to meet. And that's a huge disadvantage. And so that is the plan that we have to implement, which is let's focus on innovation. And when you know what state does the best when innovation and technology is fostered, right here, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because we've got the best minds. And if we implement a smart energy transition plan that's multifaceted, we can actually meet some of the goals, realistic goals.
Thank you.
The solution to our energy problems, I believe, also mainly is what Donald Trump says. And he does say drill, baby, drill, but he also says coal. He says fracking. He says use our energy sources here in America and become once again energy independent and begin the process of transforming our economy, because that's what would happen if we did have use of fossil fuels. China has been adding one new coal factory per week, and it's kind of an interesting story about Bitcoin. Those cities that they build, if you know, they build a city and nobody wants to live there, and so they have a brand new coal burning factory. They burn coal from North Korea that nobody can purchase because it's too filthy. But these really, honestly, are the perfect place for a Bitcoin facility right there in China. And they are making a major move on the technology. They're making a major move on their electricity production, which means they're going to be able to way out manufacture Americans. We don't have the capabilities here because we closed down our coal factories. We've got a lot of people in Massachusetts in particular that, liberals that are anti-fracking because they were told, oh, it's going to hurt the water supply. So then they're out against fracking, which isn't even done in Massachusetts, yet they are very happy to pay a low price for natural gas. But then when it comes to what is the cause of this damage to the water supply, well, guess what? Windmills on the land. That's another place that we do need to restrict, because on the land you have vibration. Every time the propeller goes around, it's harming that water supply. But yeah, so the solution is to follow what Donald Trump says about returning America to its energy independent state and reducing our dependence on the Middle East.
Thank you. The next question is about election integrity. What would you do as a U.S. Senator to ensure election integrity, all levels, including in states that allow illegal aliens to have driver's licenses. We'll start with Mr. Dean.
Earlier, I was talking about trust in institutions. And we've got to develop a much more robust, transparent plan because half of the country does not believe that we have fair elections. That's a that if this happens or this doesn't happen, we're headed to civil war. And so I hope that these elected leaders, they have to see what's happening. We've got to get nonpartisan people elected into office. There should be one test in the United States Senate. One, is it good for Massachusetts and America? If it is, call it a Democrat proposal. I'm all in. Call it an independent proposal. I'm all in. If President Trump is the president and it's good for Massachusetts and America, put his name in bold, extra size font. I'm all in. Okay, that's the test. We've got to take partisan politics out of it and people be loyal to America. And we got to start with our elections.
Mr. Antonellis.
Yes, election racketeering is a huge problem that we need to face, and we need to develop trust in our oversight boards in particular the House and the Senate, and we haven't had that. And we've seen this horrible abuse of power for the January 6th, protests, and I know that my opponents here have called the J6 an insurrection. And I do not, that's like a red line I'm not willing to cross. That was an operation. And it was Nancy Pelosi was involved. And I'll give you a little statistic that you may not have heard. That on that day, they made sure, Nancy Pelosi made sure, and the mayor of DC made sure to close all the restaurants in that area. So, I mean, the reality is people, when they are in a crowd and they say, where's the men's room? Where's the ladies' room? They went like a funnel into the Capitol building, but it was a genuine operation, and the court that Liz Cheney and others established was horrible. And I think we need to have confidence in our ability to have oversight of the election of 2020 in particular. And what I have done some work with is a Trump card. They got a tremendous play down in Dallas, CPAC Dallas, and it was a simple 7-point constitutional cure for election racketeering, because the oversight board for the Electoral College is the House and it's the Senate, and it has nothing to do with the Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court said we don't have jurisdiction, I think they were really dead on with that.
If you can wrap up, sir.
Yeah, so we need responsibility, and we need clarity, and we need truth from House and Senate to actually provide genuine oversight over the Electoral College.
Thank you. Mr. King.
Thank you. I think an easy solution upon the opportunity to enter the U.S. Senate would be supporting a national voter ID law. I think that is a place that we can easily get to. This is a concept to me that again, I'm perplexed at how this is either inhumane or it doesn't make sense to some people. We need IDs to do almost everything in life. How many times do you need to log into a certain website? I had to provide a notarized attestation to use Facebook recently. So why do we not need to use an ID, an official government issued ID to vote?
The next question is, defunding the police has led to wide-scale crime across America. As a U.S. Senator, what legislation would you support or even sponsor to return the streets of America to safety? And we'll start with Mr. King.
Sorry, I missed the first part.
Defunding the police has led to wide-scale crime across America. as a U.S. Senator, what legislation would you support, even sponsor, to return the streets of America to safety?
Absolutely. So, I took a Back the Blue pledge, before. I don't think either of my opponents have. In my role on the Quincy City Council, I have worked hand in hand with law enforcement. We're very collaborative in the city of Quincy, and I firmly understand what people have been up against since the incitement of different violence, again, from people like Elizabeth Warren and people like Ayanna Pressley, who during the riots in 2020 were encouraging people to go to the street and to cause violence and uprisings in cities and towns across our nation, which is absolutely unacceptable. So I would certainly make sure, as part of a plan that we put out, especially in addressing illegal immigration, we put it out on our site a couple of weeks ago, we would include making sure that law enforcement has the resources necessary to do their job and make sure that they can continue to provide the public safety service that they do, and that we don't need to be fearful of retribution from anyone.
Well, the first thing we have to do is secure the border. Did you know that Fall River Police Department has received a 700% increase in calls? And this is what I explained. I went on Ad Issue Boston, and the reporter was like, well, it's good to see that you're not demonizing the migrants. And I said, listen, it's math. It's just math. I went to the border, and what I learned was shocking. They're actually giving asylum court dates 8 or 9 years from now. They have no ID. You don't even know if what they're telling you is true, and they're just released and say, come back in 2032, 2033, and then they're let go. That's a fact. And so the migrants don't even run. They wait to be processed because they're let go so quickly. And listen, we've got to secure the border. That's the first thing to secure the country. 12 million when you count getaways have crossed in 3.5 years. 12 million. So even if you assume 99% of these migrants are good, decent people who want a better life, something I can identify with, even if you assume that, 1% is 120,000 bad guys. Now, God forbid if my assumption's wrong and it's 95% that are good human beings who want a better life, and it's 5% that's bad. Now you're talking about 600,000 bad guys, and we saw what 14 terrorists did to this country on 9/11. And I learned that 117 countries have been represented just in the Yuma crossing. And I learned out of those 117 countries, it includes 15 from countries that sponsor terrorism, sworn to do harm on the United States of America, North Korea, China, Russia. And they tell me, John, we caught 100 of these terrorists on the terrorist watch list, but that's who we caught. We estimate 5 times that got away. Just imagine that. So we have to secure the country before we can even deal with anything else.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Angelos.
Yes, we need to shut the border. We need remain in Mexico. We need mass deportations. We need actual law enforcement to criminalize crime in the cities, and the towns, and the states throughout America. We need federal government involvement. We need a Department of Justice that actually wants to help these locales to solve crimes, but we need to punish criminals that commit the crimes. And then in the process, we will reduce the stress on the police. And of course, we need to refund, and I do back Ian, by the way. And we need to refund the police, and we need to get Black Lives Matter exposed for what it is. And I've done a lot of research into Black Lives Matter. And by the way, it's the Black Liberation Army reborn. And it was reborn, this is shocking, on the Harvard campus in the form of a fake arrest of a Harvard professor by the name of Henry Louis Gates Jr., where he was supposedly allegedly arrested for the crime of being black. It was a concocted operation where Black Lives Matter was reborn from Black Liberation Army. It's a criminal organization, so we need to start to treat them as criminals. If you remember, they were bringing in, well, can't say, I think it was Antifa also.
You have about 30 seconds.
Bricks and all kinds of weapons and all kinds of horrible things into these protests so that they could, destroy things. So we need to start to treat them as as traitors and put them in jail for a hard time.
Thank you. We're approaching the end of our Q&A, and to get you out on time, I have two last questions. The first, I've received a lot of questions on this, and maybe I'll summarize it as, imagine you're a US Senator, and President Trump is pushing some legislation. And let's hope the GOP majority is pushing the legislation. And it comes against your personal beliefs. How do you reconcile that? What do you do? I think with that, we'll start with, this time it is Mr. King.
I'd love to know what that issue is personally, because I think that at the end of the day, you do want to vote for someone that has personal integrity. And if there's a vote that I can't take because it compromises my own beliefs, well, I probably shouldn't be in the role, right? If I'm going to compromise my own beliefs, because then you've lost my authenticity. You've lost the person that you voted in to send to the US Senate. And I've lost my soul. And then you're not going to get anything good out of it. So I think at the end of the day, I very much want to know what that bill is that's presented. But I think that you want to know that you're going to have a representative in the US Senate that has integrity, that has values, that has fundamental core beliefs, and that stands by their word, and actually has a reason that they can represent to you, a very good reason why they couldn't support that bill at the end of the day.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I already talked about it, and when I said that you have to have one test, and that one test is it good for Massachusetts and is it good for America? That's the test. And if it's not, I don't care if Donald Trump supports it. If it's not good for the country and not good for Massachusetts, I'm not going to support it. If it's Vice President Harris who becomes president, and if it's good for Massachusetts and America, I'll support it. That's the guiding role. The thing you get with me that is very different than Elizabeth Warren, she is loyal to Elizabeth Warren and her agenda, the Democratic Party. That's it. Just like she wouldn't help Governor Baker when he was trying to get money for the two bridges, the Bourne Bridge, Saginaw Bridge. Why? Because he's a Republican and she's not going to give a Republican a win. That's nonsense. Those are federally owned bridges. That was her job. So that person that goes there has that one test. It doesn't matter who's president. And that's what I will give. I will give a voice to the United States Senate because they will have to earn my vote and my support. And that is only going to be if it's good for the country that I wore the greatest fighting uniform known to the man in the United States Marine Corps. And so I'm going to make sure that I go to the Senate that we will not.
Mr. Antonellis.
Yes, when it comes to, could you read the question again, please?
President Trump is our president again. You're in a Senate majority. You're receiving pressure to vote for an issue that goes against your personal beliefs. How do you reconcile that? What would you do?
Right. Well, I actually demonstrated right here live exactly what I would do because Donald Trump, as John had said, was out at the Bitcoin convention, and so I'm a big fan of Donald Trump. I'm wearing his hat, right? So, and I support probably over 90% of everything he stands for. But I'm not going to just swallow Bitcoin because he is for Bitcoin, and I probably know a lot more about Bitcoin than he does. But so there's no way I would just roll over and say, "Oh, Donald Trump wants Bitcoin. We're going to do Bitcoin." I'd say no. So that is the way the Democrats work. And that's because they just have this curious similarity. I'll leave it at that to a crime ring, which they know they know who their boss is. You know what I'm saying? We in the world of MAGA, I think most people that are supporters of Donald Trump probably are very much like me, and would actually say, well, because it's from the heart when they support his issues, it's in their heart. He just happened to put it there. But if if you try, if he's for something that they're totally against, well, then no, they would be against it, so I'd be against that.
Thank you. Then one brief question to wrap this up before we go to your closing statements. Will each of you support the GOP nominee for Senate, no matter who it is?
Yes. Yes, I would as well, of course.
Yes. There we go. Unity. With that, we'll go to our 2-minute closing statements. We'll go in reverse order this time, Mr. Deep.
You notice how quick I said yes to that last question, because I can't imagine anyone being worse than Senator Elizabeth Warren. Her policies are actually to the American dream. As I told you before, when you look at me, you're looking at the American dream and everything capable in a great country. And I see that dream dying. I got in this race, everyone, because even though we have illegal immigration to the point where they're asking you to open your homes to undocumented, unknown individuals from around the world, as shocking as that is, and we have a debt crisis where half of Americans don't have $500 in case of an emergency, and we have an inflation crisis, a housing crisis, an opioid crisis, and we have foreign wars sparking up everywhere. The greatest crisis we face in this country is a crisis of leadership. Leaders like Elizabeth Warren who sit back and they fuel division so that they can stay in power and think that they can manipulate things like the United States Supreme Court. We need someone who understands the struggle of everyday Americans. When you look at the Senate, you don't see someone who's overcome poverty, who's couldn't pay his bills in his 40s with 2 kids and in debt over his head, who understands I'm working 50, 60 hours a week. I'm doing everything right, but I still just can't seem to get ahead. We need someone that understands that no matter what you do, you still feel like you're drowning. We're pricing regular people out of the economy. Something has to change, and it's only going to change if we elect leaders who love this country and who will put the country first and will put this state first. And that's who you have. I'm asking you for an honor, and that is the honor to have your support and your vote. If you give it to me, I promise you, I will be a candidate that you can respect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. King.
Thank you, Bob. This isn't about an individual. This is about a big project. And it involves each and every one of you in this room. I've been running around the state for the past 5 months to RTCs, to cookouts, to anywhere I can go, coffee shops, and meeting people who share their deeply personally held beliefs about the world. And they put their hopes in people like any of us that we can make things better, that we can make some changes, hopefully, in a government that seems to be at a standstill that doesn't want to work for you, that we can make things normal, that we can bring some common sense back. That's a tall order, but it doesn't happen alone. It's not about the individual. This is a collaboration. And if we don't bring together the people, the energy, and the capital to make this happen, it won't happen. And you also need to believe that this can happen. This is one of the most entrenched, popular representatives in government right now, Elizabeth Warren. Everybody knows her name. And people don't think that this can happen. But you got to believe in a candidate that has been tested, that has been elected by people, his neighbors, his family, his friends. He's from Massachusetts. He currently lives in Massachusetts. He's committed not only to this state and tripling down to this effort to serve people, but he looks at this as a 20-year project. This isn't just about running for office. This is about rebuilding a party in Massachusetts. How many people in this room are still independents? We need to get you onto the our side. You're in this room. That's what this is about. That's why we're losing. That's why uniparty control happens in the state. And that's why you're not happy with the way things are going. But this is a serious business. So this is about Massachusetts. This is about knowing it. This is about youth, energy, a long-term vision for hope and collaboration. And it's about getting shit done.
You can
So-
wrap up, sir.
I appreciate the opportunity to present my candidacy tonight and know very well that I will support each and every one of your interests in the United States Senate. So I ask for your vote first on September 3rd, and then when we trounce Elizabeth Warren on November 5th.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Antonellis.
Yes, I would love to have your support. My hope is that we can build something fantastic in the federal government of the United States that will transform America. There have been so many barriers to the amazing constitutional government, constitutional republic that we've been granted. And I'm sure we could all talk at length about what has been stopping us from having our rights. My hope is that we can use America First to Donald Trump as president to transform the country to become the constitutional republic that we've always dreamed of and have an actual single-tier justice system, have law enforcement that is provided the resources and the means and the legal right to, stop criminals, and that we have a merit-based system like Donald Trump talks about, where we have people, brilliant people, talented people from all over the world coming to America to enjoy, the bounty of America, and that we all, come together and build something bigger and better than ourselves. So that's what I'm hoping for. And I would love to have your vote on September the 3rd, November the 5th, and also tonight. Thank you very much.
So before we go to our straw poll, three things. One, if anyone ever reads Jack Reacher, he's got the perfect internal clock. These guys can stay on time better than anybody I've ever seen in a town meeting I've ever attended. So thank you, gentlemen, for being so attentive. Third, I've been a candidate. It's a fearful thing. You're putting your body and soul out there, and people are buying your product or they're not. So my hat's off to all of you for throwing your hats in the ring on behalf of all of us here at the GOP. So thank you.
So I'd like to bring up Ann Regasta, our ballot queen.
Okay, so this is the moment we've all been waiting for. The three candidates, starting with Bob Antonellis. Bob got 14 votes in person, 7 by Zoom, for a total of 21 ballot votes. Ian Kane received 18 votes in person and 11 votes by Zoom, for a total of 29 ballot votes. John Deaton received 86 votes in person, 77 votes by Zoom, for a total of 163 votes.
Good job, Ann. Congratulations, John. Congratulations to Bob and Ian. This battle is far from over. All these candidates are going to get out there and really work their butts off. They have a big day on Tuesday, September 3rd, and it's up to all of you to get out there and vote for the real vote. Cast the real vote. So thank you very much for coming. John, again, congratulations.